Hello and welcome to another episode of Cascadia Mountain Weather. It's Thursday, October 23rd, and things are starting to look a bit snowy in the mountains, even though it's not even Halloween. And we got a big storm coming up this weekend.
Yeah, so I brought up this picture just to kind of highlight maybe some of the conditions that you would see. This was taken a week and a bit ago, still, but things are starting to look pretty snowy, as Kyle mentioned. I want to give a broad overview of what this weekend is going to look like, and then we'll kind of start to narrow it in and look more at the details. So this is looking at one of our model runs, the European model run, and this is looking pretty wide out. Here's Washington State right here. And you can see we have this big atmospheric river that's pointed into the northern end of Vancouver Island at about 5 o'clock on Friday, or sorry, 5 o'clock on Thursday night. As we move through Thursday night and into Friday, you can see this is starting to sag south. And so this is looking at now 10 a.m. Friday, and you can see that it's covered most of the area. Then it moves through into the overnight hours on Friday night into Saturday. And then we have this next storm system coming up that actually is going to bring some decently strong winds as it kind of moves in over Vancouver Island, maybe even a little bit further south. So this is going to move in during the day, Saturday, especially Saturday morning into kind of overnight Saturday. And then as we get into Sunday, so this is now looking at kind of in the morning Sunday, you can see this final push of moisture coming in. And this is kind of another system that is going through. It quiets down into Monday before we get another potential system coming in here. This is a pretty big storm, but it looks like it's probably going to end up to the north of us, but it's still too far out to tell. So that's kind of in the Monday to Tuesday time frame. Like I said, we're going to try to narrow it down a little bit more. So now we're looking mostly just at Washington, and this is 3 hour increments for precipitation. So we are now looking at about 2 p.m. Friday. And let me just make sure that we get all our increments. So as we move through the afternoon, kind of morning to afternoon on Friday, you can see this is when the heaviest rain is coming through. That's when that atmospheric river is going to be dropping south, but it's going to move through pretty quickly and not bring a ton of rain. You can see, or not like a extreme amount of rain, I guess. This is looking 2 to 5 p.m. on Friday. You can see that this is much of like the Cascades are kind of under this fire hose, but it fades pretty quickly and moves east pretty quickly as well. Then we have kind of showers as we get into the overnight hours on Saturday before this next storm system moves in. Now, right now, this is looking at the American model or a version of the American model. And this American model suggests that it actually might be a decent morning on Saturday. So this is looking kind of 8 to 11 a.m. on Saturday morning, and then 11 to 2 a.m. 11 to 2 p.m. on Saturday kind of afternoon. Suggests it's going to be dry over most of the area. This is a disagreement in the models in terms of like we do think that, and I'll show that in a second, that the European model, which tends to be a little bit more accurate, thinks the storms are going to arrive a little bit earlier. But this could be a potential window if you're trying to get out and avoid the rain. Could be that Saturday morning, or as we move forward, even that Sunday morning looks decent throughout the area, especially in the lowlands. But we'll get into that in a little bit. And I just wanted to highlight, so this is flipping back to the European model. And as we go forward, this is our atmospheric river, and we're zooming in, and this shows that kind of this is looking through 11 a.m. on Saturday. So where the American model showed it being pretty dry in most of this area, kind of Seattle northward, even through about 2 p.m., this European model suggests that it might be a little bit rainier. So just be aware that could be a window, but I think it's kind of starting to look a little bit less likely than it was previously. Now, if we go to the higher resolution, I just want to look at this one more time. So we've zoomed into Western Washington. Here's our atmospheric river moving through on Friday. Then we get into Saturday. Once again, this kind of dry slot or possible dry slot Saturday morning. And then getting into kind of these more showery activity as we get towards Sunday morning. In terms of 24-hour precip, I wanted to highlight this just in case, we don't end up having this dry slot on the west side. It does look like Sunday is going to be drier on the east side, especially as you get down towards Yakima, and kind of Ellensburg area. So that could be a potential possibility. This is looking from like 5 a.m. Sunday through 5 a.m. Monday. So this area over here, you might avoid the heaviest rain if you are trying to stay dry. And then one final thing related to precipitation, I did want to look at kind of our total accumulated amounts through the weekend. So this is looking from kind of 5 p.m. Thursday or even 5 a.m. Thursday through 5 a.m. Monday. Looks like we're going to see kind of 1 to 2 inches in the lowlands and maybe 2 to 4 inches in the mountains with higher amounts, especially to the south, kind of near the volcanoes. So it's going to be focused more to the south, kind of in the Olympia to Portland area and those South Washington Cascades. Now, we started talking about snow at the beginning, and that is because we are going to see a snow level drop. So right now, the snow level is in like the 6 to maybe even 9,000 foot range, kind of up ahead of this atmospheric river. You might have noticed that it felt relatively warm outside today. Now, as we get in through the early morning hours tomorrow, we're going to start to see this atmospheric river come through and those temperatures and snow levels dropping. So by 4 a.m. Saturday, we should be in kind of about the 6,000 foot range. And then by 4 a.m. Sunday, where we have the coldest air, that kind of showery air that we saw earlier, that's when our snow level is going to drop to maybe 3,000 feet, especially to the north, maybe 3,500 feet to the central and the south. And it's going to hang there for a couple of days before we get a little bit more uncertain and kind of some more storms come through. What that means is we are going to see snow in the mountains. So this is looking at our highest resolution model, the American model. And as we go forward, you can see that as the precipitation starts, it's really on the only on the highest peak. So up here, here's Mount Baker, and it's really kind of in that 7 to 8,000 foot range. And then it kind of spreads through the North Cascades, but only at the high elevations. This is looking at kind of in the afternoon on Friday. But then as we get later into the day on Friday, what happens is the snow level starts to drop. So you can see that snow starting to shift to the west as we get to the lower elevations. And so that is on Friday. And then we have a more showery nature on Saturday. And then we start seeing some heavier snowfall, especially down to the south, um, overnight, Saturday night into Sunday. So in terms of total snowfall, we can see that will slowly build up. But especially as we get into the overnight Saturday into Sunday, that's when we're going to see the heaviest snowfall. So down to the south, we might see anywhere from 2 to 3 feet of snow, especially up above 5,000 feet, especially by the end of the day, Sunday into Monday morning. Might see some pretty heavy snowfall as well in the central to north Cascades. Once again, kind of 2 to 3 feet, maybe getting out towards some of the areas to the east side, maybe in that one, like 12 to 18-inch range. And one final thing I want to mention about those kind of direct impacts of the storm is our to see some wind. So this are kind of estimated wind gusts. This red area in the roughly 40-mile-an-hour range. So as we move through the day, this is Friday at 8 a.m., we're going to see some decently strong wind, especially kind of over the waters. And then that will pass. But our best chance of strong wind actually comes in Saturday into Sunday. So that's when we see kind of this wind, which was that second storm system moving up to Vancouver Island. And this is in that off the coast, should be in like the 60 to maybe even 70-mile-an-hour range, straight off the coast. And that's going to kind of make its way in. It's a little bit uncertain exactly how strong it's going to be in the lowlands. But maybe gusts 40, maybe even touching 50 in some places, in the mountains. As with these storms usually happening, we'll see gusts 50, 60, 70 miles an hour, and maybe even higher, on the upper peaks. And that will spread throughout the day, Saturday evening into Sunday before it fades. Sunday should be relatively quieter in the Cascades, in terms of wind.
So now we'll take a look at like some point forecasts. This is Washington Pass, up around 5,000 feet. And by Saturday, we'll probably be looking at, especially later in the day, snow versus maybe some rain on Friday. And temperatures, yeah, definitely getting pretty chilly down in the 20s and significant snowfall, they're calling for. 3 to 7 inches just on Saturday night. So we could probably see another foot up at Washington Pass and certainly in the higher elevations. Um, Now, Mount Rainier is a completely different story. So, being on the kind of southwest side of the storm, they're going to get hammered. We're looking at pretty heavy snowfall, especially Saturday night, 8 to 12 inches, gusty. Sunday more snow. The park has said that Paradise will be closed this weekend, and maybe it'll reopen next week. As the weather calms down. And if it does, you could probably be skiing to the car. I know people have been, skiing about 1,000 feet above the car right now, but yeah, this will definitely bring us towards a more wintry snowpack. So it's never too early to look at snow water equivalent percentages. And this is a bit ridiculous of a map because it shows that we're at 2,000% of normal, aka 20 times normal snowpack in the southwestern Cascades. It doesn't really mean much except that, there is more snow than normal for October. We'll take a particular look at some other few spots, but later. So yeah, right now we're kind of seeing that starfish pattern. We see it in the spring too. Areas around 5,000 feet are starting to definitely hold a snowpack. We might see that drop to more like 4,000 after this weekend. And yeah, areas east of the crest, there's just like more terrain that's up around that elevation. So that's why you can see like the Pasayten and Chelan Sawtooth have the largest areas of that actually like have snow coverage. This is the Easy Pass Snowtail site. So this is at about 5,000 feet in the North Cascades, one of the snowier spots that we have. And after this weekend, it's likely that we'll hit a new all-time high for this Snowtail site for late October. The data only goes back to 2009, so it's only like 15 years data, but we will likely set a new high for the time of year. Now, you can also see that, we're less than a 20th through the season or whatever, so it doesn't really mean much for whether the rest of the season is good or not, but it's a good start. Um, One thing, the weather's not great this weekend, but if there are periods of better weather, we are heading in towards peak Western larch. So Western larches are a lot less popular, more overlooked than their popular alpine larch cousins. But the Western larches grow in kind of the central and southern Cascades east of the crest. And this photo was taken last weekend, so they'll be getting nice and gold. And they grow more at the mid elevations. You can see them driving over Blewett Pass, driving over Chinook Pass out towards Yakima. You can see them right along the road, so they're a lot easier to view. And the long-term outlook is still looking relatively stormy. So we'll keep the storm train rolling, and it's a good start to winter.